Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. I can do better than that. Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And this live show that I do, this podcast that I do Monday to Friday, I explore the inside. It is rather sometimes, I try to keep it light, it's in how we present things that we get the job done. And sometimes we can't take big bites into topics, right? So, as per my entrance tonight, I knew I was going into a topic. And in my own experiences, those are the examples, right? Those are the examples. And we're supposed to learn off of each other. And in saying that, if you guys hung out with me last night, we had this card acceptance. It's one of a couple of cards that consistently show up in my deck of 54 powerful words. If you've never hung out with me before, this is a deck that I put together, right? And it's powerful words. Every single card is a powerful word. And there are cards in this deck other than when I was working on them, because when I was working on them every single day, I had to go into that exact same word and use it in a different perspective, in a different aspect, whether it was an experience, a conversation, an adventure that I was in. I try not to use other people's stories because, that's other people's stories. And I'm supposed to be the example for my own audience, right? So I came in tonight and I wasn't I wasn't anxious about it. Let's just put it that way. It was something about last night's live show in pulling that word acceptance. And it's one of those words that consistently show up that I pull it out of that deck. And like I said, there are cards that I've never pulled in that deck yet, except there are these two or three words that all the time they show up. And that is significant to me because it's significant in some way. And so I always go with the first thing that comes to my mind, right? And I go into it the best that I can because I want those powerful words, those few powerful words to stop showing up every time I do my podcast. Well, number one, who wants to go into the exact same word consistently, like almost every week, some of these cards, right? But that is the indication for me that I am not getting something sunk in, right? It's not digesting into my system. It's not dissolving. It's not sitting right in my system. Kind of just, what can I do? All I can do is have a little giggle and say, oh my goodness, we got this card again. But I know for myself that, like I said, there's something significant that I'm missing in this. So I always, you guys know, if you hung out with me for any length of time, you guys know I go back into these words. And not just those words that pop up, but I go into my live shows almost every single night because those lessons are for me too. Lots of times I just come in and I just go off and I miss 3/4 of it myself. And that's the truth. So I went into my live show last night, to my podcast last night, and right before I pulled that card, I went and I grabbed the deck out of my little, I had this little box here, and I keep I keep the one that's going into production in a baggie, and then this is my loose one that I sit here, right? The prototype I sent off to a friend. But when I was sitting here, I was finishing off sentences. And as I was sitting here, the way I held my deck, and I didn't even notice until after I went into my own podcast to watch it again. What was the first card at the top of the deck? It was that word acceptance. And I'll tell you what happened. Well, I'll tell you now what happened. When I just turned my laptop on now to start my live show, I don't know, but my YouTube channel came up and my studio came up, and there was my big thumbnail with me holding that card, acceptance. And I just like, right? Like I'm getting slapped upside the head with this word acceptance. But the first word that I saw when I rewatched my podcast last night was the word acceptance in my first deck. And you guys know that I sit here and I chat to you guys and I'm shuffling the cards and stuff. And what happens? I pull that word acceptance, have myself a little giggle because it shows up all the time, but I didn't realize it showed up twice yesterday in my live. But I went into it. First perspective that came to my mind in that moment, and I went into it. And then when I watched my live and I noticed it again as the top card before I even started shuffling that deck, that I knew like I have to go into it. So I spent most of the day just piddling around and listing jewelry and going to a walk to the grocery store and stayed in that topic of acceptance. And I just felt it out. Like I felt it in relation to my own life. And I have to say, my jaw literally hit the ground. It didn't literally hit the ground. It's just like, oh my goodness, that's what it is. You guys know that I come in here and I just go into that flow, right? I'm not somebody who goes by notes. I don't normally study the topics before I come in. I, on the norm, don't even know what the topic of discussion is going to be, right? I just trust that it's going to be that acceptance, right? But because this was so important, because I got it, I know I got it this time, this word acceptance better not show up for a while, because I really do think I've got it. It hit me upside the head so hard that I really, really, really have to spend some time, not just the afternoon and the past hour and tidying up. I had three sets of notes here, and I compounded it because, I don't want to, it wasn't even in order. So I wanted to have it in order so that my audience can kind of get where I was trying to get to. And also, I wanted to do it tidy because I'm going to read the note and then just go into it possibly for a minute, or maybe I'll just go on to the next section of my notes. And I apologize for that. You guys know I'm not a note girl, but I think this is important. Not just important for me, but I think this is very important for a lot of people out there. This might be a really good one, right? For someone anyway. Maybe for me, if I don't consistently get that word acceptance again. So we're going to go into this word acceptance again in a different perspective, in a truth for myself that I realized today. Okay, so I'm just going to read this. Hello, Tammy, and you're welcome to give me your input and your ideas in in what I'm going to go into. We pulled that word acceptance. Did you notice yesterday, Tammy, when I started shuffling the deck, that the first card that was on the top of the deck was that word acceptance? And then I'm just yapping away, you guys. I'm shuffling the cards and I go, okay, time to pull a card. And I pulled that card, acceptance. And I'm like, what's the odds? And this is the way my life is, right? But these are the serendipities. These are the breadcrumbs. These are the little clues and nuances that we are supposed to pick up. But because they're consistently coming across our path, like this word acceptance, that's the message for us. That's what's trying to get through our noggins, get through our hearts, get through our beings, right? And so I thought I would give it another shot tonight in a truth that I discovered today, right? Okay, you guys, we're going to get into this word acceptance. We'll start with the first one. And again, I apologize for the notes, right? I know lots of people go by notes or point lists and stuff, but that's not usually the way I run. But I wanted to get this across because I feel it's important, right? And I may do this more often. If I see these cards keep popping up like this word community, we better not get that one tonight. I've got stuff to do. I've got listings to do. And it's difficult to be in contemplation and at the same time, right? You're doing listings and descriptions and photos and you're trying to concentrate on what you do. And it's, I am a bit of a multitasker, but you only do a fraction of the quality of the job when you multitask, right? It's what I've done in my jobs my entire life. I've never been an absolute expert in everything except customer service, only because I'm just dabbling and just doing everybody's job and cross training and picking up the slack, that I don't get good at anything. I get the job done. Lots of times it's fast and messy. Sometimes it's just totally inadequate. Okay, here we go. Acceptance is my greatest enemy and downfall. And it's always been my total acceptance for what was and what is, right? And I never looked at it that way because, in growing up, I shouldn't get too far off of this. But not only this, right, being my greatest enemy and my greatest downfall, acceptance, this powerful word, was also my saving grace. That's pretty deep. That's pretty heavy for me to recognize. Acceptance started with the neglect, the rejection, and the betrayal that I experienced as a small child, as a teenager, and as a young adult, to the point where I disassociated from my pain and I no longer showed that understanding by being indifferent and unbothered by my circumstances or by what people thought, right? And that's kind of a saving grace in that. It is kind of a saving grace. My saving grace was it made it easier for me to overcome my emotions, right? My circumstances. And it helped me to accept my limitations. I learned not to cry over what was, right? It just made me indifferent. It made me, right? Every time somebody said mean thing to me, right? Every time, I found myself in a situation where I was betrayed. I accepted that that's what was going to happen. So I would just kind of move along, right? Just accept what was. But also in that, it stopped me from being in my head. It not necessarily my head, which it did because I would just wouldn't care, right? I just wouldn't care because it was something that I accepted. I accepted, right? All these limitations that I grew up in, and I accepted it was going to happen. So when it happened, I just kind of accepted it, right? My message for everybody is to never give in to the state of acceptance, to never, never, ever, ever give in to the state of acceptance. It takes the bite out of you, right? It takes that love for life out of you, right? You accept what is, so you never come out of that negative state. You're always just in a negative state because you don't see the opportunities, you don't see the beauty, you don't see the possibilities for yourself and others, right? Because you're just in that accepting state. It steals your motivation and it makes you so you don't want to even try. Why bother try, right? I'm fat. I'm ugly. I'm stupid. I'm good for nothing. People are just going to betray me. People are just going to leave me, right? People are just going to take what I have to give and not give anything back in return. Why try? It steals your motivation, right? I'm a very motivated person. I am. But it took a lot of lessons, and I have been deep into those lessons. It's obvious for me to recognize this. It might have taken me 64 years to recognize it, but in the end, I recognized it. It makes you retreat to the inside, and it kills your want to interact or explore the outside, right? Again, you accept what is. The saving grace. Now, this is where I'm going to use some examples, okay? When my father died, wow, I had one bad night. I allowed myself one horrible, traumatic night, and then I put my dad's death up on a shelf. I went back to my friends. I went back to work. I went back to my life. And I put all those lessons and all those beautiful experiences that I had with my father away. And right again, I accepted his death. There was nothing I can do about it. And you guys hear me all the time say, I don't cry over spilt milk. If there's nothing I can do about it, I just kind of move on, right? I accept what is. When my marriage ended, right? We never had an argument. There was I love yous, hugs, kisses, kindnesses. I felt my husband's heart. It's right, highly sensitives and empathic, souls. We feel these things. When my husband walked in that door that day and said, Cindy, we need to talk. I'm not quite sure if I want to be married anymore. Right? He didn't say he didn't want to be married anymore. He says, I'm not quite sure if I want to be married anymore. We've been together at that point by 8, 9 years already. And it hit me upside the head. just like this realization today did. And it devastated me in the moment. But I didn't let that show, right? I put that armor up and I said, go, go. And I never gave him a chance, right? And I'm not going to truly say that because it was a really hard breakup. I had to leave. We were living in Edmonton at that time. I just packed everything up and I just left. I just came back to Winnipeg and I went poor and I lost jobs and so did he. It was a total disaster. It was. And I didn't give him a chance. I could not get over. I considered it betrayal. And I didn't even give him a chance to explain. I didn't even, it was just dead in me, right? It was just dead in me. Why? Because this is what I expected, right? This is what I expected all my life. Why would it be any different now? Go. We're done, right? I have to be my own example in this. And, this is when I first came in today and I had that little reaction. And, right, I didn't put much energy into that da 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 da, right? And it was because of, right, when I have to go in to these heavy topics and I have to use myself as those examples, right? One of these reasons, the main reason as to my husband walking in the door that day and saying that is because for about 2 months prior to that, I started hounding him about having a baby, right? I had hit 37 years old and the time clock was ticking and I understood that he didn't want children. He was honest in that. And when he asked me to marry him, I said, like, I can't marry you. I want to have children, right? But I loved him too. And if I had to, right, not have children in order to have him, that was a sacrifice I was willing to have because I truly loved my husband, right? But he said, we had that talk and he said, okay, one. You can have one, Cindy, right? And we were probably 3 years, we lived together for a while, right? So I would have to say we were 3 or 4 years into our marriage and I hit 37. So yeah, I got married at 31. So it must have been 6 years, right? 6 years. And I said, okay, right? It's going to be now or it's going to be never, right? I'm going to go into menopause soon. Like, right? Like if I'm going to have a baby, that one that he promised me that I could have, then it's got to be now. And I started in those conversations, right? And I pushed it. I pushed it hard. And, he promised me. And it's not like, we could have waited much longer. Like I said, if it was going to happen, it had to happen at that point. And right, he backed out on that. He got scared in that and he didn't want to pass his genes on. He was very much like me, possibly even woke up to some of these ideas that I have recently woke up to. So I wasn't woke up to any of these ideas. I was empathic. I knew right away that something was wrong when he walked in that door that day. Never felt that before, never even a hint, never even crossed my mind ever. I thought we were forever, right? I never even knew anybody who had ever divorced. I was the first person to get a divorce in my family, right? Not that that bothers me, right? That I needed to have that cut off, that relationship, because neither of us could let go. He wanted me to stay in the city and keep me as his side chick. I like that word, side chick. I've used it a couple of times this week, but I don't like the idea of that. I just packed my things up and I moved back to Winnipeg. But by that time, I had given up all my civilian friends. I had found new friends and a new family in my husband's friends and family. My husband was in the military. And, right, I didn't change my mind, right? My time clock, whatever you call that, was still ticking away. And I didn't know civilians, right? And I ended up dating men who were actually my husband's friends, right? The people that I knew, people that I trusted, people that I knew cared for me and right? And at that time I had lost a lot of weight, right? I could tell that men were interested that way and I just took advantage of that and right was just hoping to use one of them as a sperm donor, right? I was still heartbroken, but I'm not one for crying over spilt milk. I accepted the situation that me and my husband were never going to get back together, even though we tried, because it's not really trying, it's just not being able to pull away from each other, right? But it had to be done. And, at the same time, I didn't want to hurt my husband, right? But I did get pregnant. I did get pregnant. And that pregnancy was everything to me. And I was so excited. I had announced it to my family and my friends. I was excited by that. And right early in my pregnancy, I wiped out really, really hard at work. Like I wiped out so hard, like I was really hurting. But at the same time, I didn't know that I was pregnant at that time. And I just assumed that my backaches and all my whatever with pregnancies was the cause of that fall. Well, what had happened is I ended up having they call it an ectopic pregnancy, right? I had a tubal pregnancy. And I went in and never thought anything of it. I just was going in for my, what do you call that? That scan that they have. And by that time, I was already going into my third month, and it was very, very dangerous at that time. I didn't know anything about tubal pregnancies. There wasn't internet, at that time. Like I couldn't Google it or anything. I might have been able to pick up a book or something, or maybe the doctors explained it to me. But they said they had to remove it because there was a possibility of my fallopian tube blowing up. Right. And I freaked out. I didn't want the pregnancy terminated because, I was going to be 38. I didn't, right? I wanted this baby. This was the most important thing in my life. This was the only thing that I had in my life. But there really wasn't much of a choice because, right, if my fallopian tube exploded, which it did, right, there was this possibility that I would die from that. So I went in and I had the operation. The fallopian tube, just one of the tubes, exploded, and I was in the hospital. I don't know, 3 weeks or a month. Right, it was pretty serious situation, and I just healed up over it. Right, I don't cry over spilt milk. I accepted what I had to accept, but it kind of at that point woke me up to say, my life is more important than having a baby, and I'm not going to try again, right? I accepted that I was going to be childless, which I am. And that's a terrible thing to happen because in the world that we live in now, a majority now, a very large, I'm not going to say the majority, but a large portion of women are childless now. And it's accidental childness because sometimes it's in those careers, sometimes it's in that idea of, right, innovation. I can have babies later on. And then to find out there are fertility issues and stuff. But for myself, I just accepted what was and I just carried on with my life. And when I say acceptance was my saving grace, right? It was because it helped me to overcome the grief of my father passing away. It helped me to overcome, right, my marriage falling apart. And that was a tough one. I really loved my husband, right? I really loved my father too. And then it just, that's what is, right? I accepted that I was never going to have children. And, I accepted that. And in looking back in that, in my saving grace of accepting that I wasn't going to have children and the fact that I didn't have children, and then waking up at 57 years old to some of these ideas, not this idea of acceptance, that was only something that slapped me upside the head today, right? What kind of mother would I have been, right? Would I have epigenetically passed these limitations down to my children, right? These understandings that I had to my children, right? I probably would have stumbled over myself to be the best mother ever, right? We all want better by our children than what we received ourselves. But was I capable at that time of being that person, right? I couldn't even hold a job, right? That even though, right, on the outside, nothing was bothering me. Don't mess with me, right? Everything is good, right? That was nothing. Who cares, right? It was a different it was a different story in the inside. And like I said, that wasn't something I really understood, sorry, until today. And it's a truth. We should never ever. How did I say it today? Um my message. There it is. Never give up, right? To the state of acceptance because it takes the fight out of you. You accept what is, so you never come out of that negative state. It's just always there, but it's just not visible on the outside, right? It steals your motivation and it makes it so you don't want to try, right? I was 37 years old. I could have tried again to have a baby, right? I could have I could have had that chance if I hadn't just accepted the fact that, oh, well, right? I still even had one fallopian tube, right? I still would have had that capability of having children if I wasn't so stuck in that word acceptance, right? It makes you retreat into the inside and it kills your want to interact or to explore the outside. At that point, right? I gave up. And it was a good thing that I did it. Like I said, my husband was in the military. I didn't want to hurt my husband. Uh, but at the same time, I had dreams and I didn't have anybody else, right? I wasn't going to go to the bar and do the one night stands and stuff and not have those good genes, right? I wanted to be with somebody I cared about. And even if I didn't love them, like I loved my husband, I cared for these people. And I know these people cared for me, right? They might not have known that I was just out to get pregnant, but at the same time, they were getting what they needed out of that relationships that we were having too, right? Uh, I wish I had actively felt it all, right? And something I didn't understand in my experiences. You might have noticed that I talked a little bit about it in the past couple of months. Is you know this is where I might cry because I'm feeling it, right? When my cat died, I've lost lots of cats in my life, lots of them, right? And I've always been somebody who've just been, right, throw the cat litter box away, throw the cat food away, right? Get another cat or don't get another cat and just go on with my life. Like, maybe I would have cried. It would have been a sad situation. I know it was. I missed my cats, but whew, not like this one. And this one, today, I understood. It's because I'm allowing myself to feel. I'm allowing myself to accept and feel, not just accept what is, but to accept that I can be, right? I can feel things out. I can be hurt and not fall apart. And I look at this as success. I look at this as advancement in my movement forward. And, it's been 2 months and it hurts just as much now as when it happened. She came into my life when I first started waking up to some of these ideas. Okay, maybe shortly after that, because I had another cat. Maybe I just hadn't gotten to that stage yet. But she helped me get through a lot of rough times that I had to go through by myself. And I'm sorry, you guys, right? But I hope this helps somebody because I'm coming at it in a different perspective. And maybe it's the right perspective. Maybe that card will show up again tonight. Who knows, right? But I believe that I hit it properly. We shouldn't just accept what is. We should fight for what we love. Like I should have fought for my marriage and I didn't, right? I should have tried again to have a baby, right? And I should have let myself mourn my father's passing. And I didn't, right? And those were just a few examples. There are many, 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 right? And lots of them I won't course correct just as because I've gone beyond that and that pain and that hurt has mellowed out in my life. And of course, I woke up to some better understandings. I believe there's still better understandings, but this is what shadow work is, right? In understanding where we got things wrong and where we got things right. And understanding, even in this word acceptance, it still served the purpose in the moment because I didn't have the capacity to feel that way. I didn't have the capacity to hold on to that pain, to that heartbreak, to that betrayal, right? To that saying goodbye. It's a little bit different now. We should feel what we're supposed to feel, right? Because once you feel it, once you understand it, then maybe it becomes a blessing rather than a curse. And I think I'll leave it at that. I hope that's good enough. I hope we don't get this word acceptance for a while because I don't want to come at it in a different perspective. Because if I do, then it just might have to be tonight's perspective. And I'm just going to put this away because, like I said, you guys know I'm not big on point lists or notes. I just like to come in, get into the topic, and first perspective, just get into it. But I hope this helps somebody, right? It's hard. I understand lots of us do this. Lots of us shut down. Lots of us become a frequency rather than that other part of yourselves that you've rejected, right? And that's sad because sometimes when you get to that point where you're no longer feeling like you're a human being, right? That you just live up here or in here, right? You don't live out here. And when you don't live out here, you don't get to have those glorious experiences that you get to have by just being a human being and experiencing the catastrophes along with the beautiful landscapes and the blessings. Okay, you guys, let's get into a word. I'm a little bit nervous tonight about this card. But I trust, right, that whoever or whatever knows I've had enough of this word today. Maybe even for the next month or so. That would be nice. But I'm gonna hold it up here just so you guys know I'm not not purposely pulling these cards. That was a hard one for me, but at the same time, oh my goodness, it helps me to feel better about where I'm at. It makes me feel better, and it makes me feel that I've got an understanding to that, an understanding that might be useful when I'm trying to pull this junk out of other people and maybe stop somebody from just becoming a frequency, right? For giving up in the human in them, right? It happens, it does. I've personally met people that it has happened to. And of course, I'm online all the time. So, even in some of those creators out there that I admire, right? I see it in them too. But sometimes that's the only way that they can bear to do what they have to do, what they've been guided to do, right? Okay, you guys, here we go. It is what it is, right? But this is really good, because everybody can learn from each other, right? And me to be the experience for somebody else who might be going through the same experience or maybe a different experience that finds them in the same situation as acceptance. Lots of times it's part of the programming so that we don't look for anything better, right? And that's an unfortunate truth, but to be able to wake up to that notion, to that understanding, oh my goodness, that's a step forward. Okay, you guys, here we go. Maybe it's relatable to the topic we talked tonight. Oh, you guys. Oh my goodness, you guys. This is awful. This is this is this is the second card that always comes up. The first thing that came to my mind is, oh my goodness, right? In sharing that, is that what's gonna magnetize my community to me, right? I love the community that I have now, but in the way that I do my shadow work, right? I like to keep it light. I like to do it it's not fun, you guys, right? Shadow work is not fun, but it doesn't have to be devastating. And after that work is done, to be able to go on with your life without those heartbreaks and those betrayals and the what ifs, right? That stop us in making that movement forward. Remember, I've already folded it to put away. Maybe in doing our shadow work together, in right moving down that path for a little while, maybe not forever, but for a little while, for long enough to a little bit of that understanding to seep into my system and your system, that we can be a part of that larger community that can go out into the world and be the examples for others. I'm not going to get into this word too deep. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a giggle, a little bit of giggle, and maybe a little bit of contemplation on that one. Oh my goodness. This is something, and if you haven't been with me for a while, go back into some of those past words of community, right? Those past podcasts and those lives that I did. And yeah, you'll see how often this word pops up. It's really incredible. The two words that show up all the time in my life. And they both showed up in the same night. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. I'm done for tonight. Thank you, Eugene. I was wondering if you were going to show up tonight. And thank you so much, Tammy, for popping in again tonight. And if you want to go check out one of the other words, community, you'll see the thumbnails, lots of them. I hope well, I know I didn't do much with the word community, but I think I did enough with the word acceptance tonight. So I say goodnight to my ever growing community. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.